Welcome, Bitcoiners. It's Saturday morning and it's bright out. The sun is definitely up. You can see it coming into my screen. Bitcoin's running. We're totally good. We can just talk now about the optimistic hyper-Bitcoinization, which is imminent. Imminent. Days away. We're days away. You know, it could be more or less, but it's measurable in days before hyper-Bitcoinization. Could be a few hundred. I predict in the low thousands of days until we're there. But it's coming one day closer, one day closer. As you know, we like to start the show with fake and stupid news. Morning, Justin. With fake and stupid news. So today we've got Elton John. Everyone knows who Elton John is. He's a singer. I don't think he's a songwriter. I think he had a partner, Morning Bud. I think he had a partner who helped him write all of his hit songs, but we all know who he is, right? I'm a fan, honestly. I've loved his music for years. Not every song, but I'm a fan in general. But that might change, and I'm not necessarily a cancel culture guy. I can still enjoy the fella's music, but it looks like he's got a major problem with Twitter. And he decided to share with the world yesterday that he's done with Twitter and Elon Musk. This was his tweet, right? Elton John, all my life I've tried to use music to bring people together, yet it saddens me to see how misinformation is now being used to divide our world. Oh my goodness. I didn't know the information was being used to divide our world. So, because he's got to stand against the world being divided, right? So he's gonna quit, right? He said, I've decided to no longer use Twitter, given their recent change in policy, which will allow misinformation to flourish unchecked. Oh my goodness. Elton, misinformation to flourish unchecked. So of course the internet had a lot of fun with this, right? Got some questions here. Morning, everyone. Haven't stacked today yet. Yesterday. I'm a Friday stacker. You know, one of the things that I think works in Bitcoin's favor, honestly, you know, the direct deposit and all this bullshit that they use in the ACH and the US dollar system for paychecks. We don't receive paychecks in America really anymore, right? People just get direct deposits into their bank account. And the minute that started, I said, well, you know, the little bit of reward that you get from depositing a check or from just receiving it in your hands was actually a big incentive to participate in the system. And I believe this is pre-Bitcoin. I believe that by taking out the physical pay action, where it's just like, oh, it's in my account, that they actually put almost a timer on the ability of people to be trained to participate in corporate America. And that's going to be we're going to be talking about corporate America today. That's sort of the whole thing. So one of the major things that I trained myself to do in early Bitcoin days was to use Fridays as a buying day. And I don't give a shit about the price. And I bought it at $60,000 on Fridays. But on Friday, where I have some dry powder, I shoot it, right? I buy Bitcoin. So, you know, just a bit of advice out there if you want to train yourself again into rewards, the feeling of rewarding yourself for something. Because it's been taken away from paychecks, you can use Bitcoin buying as a substitute psychologically to train yourself to enjoy being richer, right? So just seeing your Bitcoin go up on a Friday is enough actually to train yourself into the habit of doing it all the time. And that's kind of how I approach it. Of course, I've missed Fridays. And of course, I've said, you know, I don't really like the prices today. Maybe it'll be better next week. So that's come from years of doing this and years of practice. But as a piece of advice out there, for those sort of struggling in the middle of keeping a lot of their life in fiat and trying to move to a full Bitcoin worldview, maybe not even worldview, a full Bitcoin organizing principle, organizing your whole life around Bitcoin. It's one of the nicest, easiest things you can do that will actually train you into seeing your whole net worth in terms of Bitcoin. So just a bit of advice, right? Just a bit of advice. Justin's agreeing with me. Good. He says, I had a job where I got cash in an envelope every 2 weeks. Yeah. When I lived in South Korea and I was an English teacher, between my undergrad and my law school in South Korea. And they would pay you in cash, but because of their own inflation, their largest bill is the 10,000 won. They changed it recently, but when I lived there, the largest bill was the 10,000 won, which was our $10 and roughly 10 US dollars. And so you'd get paid, I would get paid, about at the time 50,000 won an hour. So I would go do private classes and I would leave, say it was a 2-hour class, they would give me 100,000 won when I would leave. And I got so used to getting these envelopes that the minute I went, that's where this disappointment actually came from. I'd been receiving paychecks. I worked in restaurants, dishwashing, all that kind of stuff when I was a teenager, had a million jobs, landscaping. I would 3 or 4 jobs at a time. When you grow up in some of these small New England style towns, it's very, you go for a walk on a Saturday and someone's going to say, hey, I need a help with a fence, or hey, I need a help with this, and they'll pay you. And I needed the money, so I took every job that came and made a lot of money as a kid, actually. But this, training yourself, when I left Korea and I wasn't getting the envelopes anymore, that's kind of when the direct deposit stuff came in Canada and the United States. And I remember saying, like, this, it was more money because I had, sort of a real job. And I was like, this sucks. I want my cash envelopes again, so great. The Catacomb says, doesn't feel 100% complete until it hits that cold storage. Yeah, it is a good, yeah, you're right. Sometimes when I do it, I often use, even though it's not the non-KYC thing, I still like the Cash App experience. And so often use Cash App. These are not huge purchases, right? It's $1,000 here and $1,000 there. But what I do is, you can use the Lightning wallet right after and transfer it. So I often do that. But I think it's a great experience. I'm wondering if they started direct deposit as a way to keep your money in the system. I think so. Well, hold on. I wouldn't give them that much credit. I think it was a good idea to some. You noticed what a lot of these companies want is the direct deposit, because you can actually put other products on top. So I don't know if it's so much leave the system as it is leave the ecosystem of a bank. Because the moment you get the direct deposit, there's a lot of things you can actually start doing with the client, and the money's sort of in there. So I wouldn't say it's a systemic thing. It was more the bank wanting to keep it in their ecosystem. That's just my guess, right? Seeing those commas on your checks feels good, man. Yeah, it sure does, Mick, to me. Yeah, but again, a check was good, right? A check, it wasn't the physical cash that you needed. It was just the act of getting it versus, oh, let me log into my stupid app and see if the money touched my account. Did it touch your account? People say it's so stupid, right? Anyway, let me get to the, I missed the jokes on the Elton John because they're good. So I just wanted to share. So he quit, Elton John quit Twitter. And of course, Twitter had a great time with this, right? So the first one, this is my favorite one, right? Elton John left Twitter because of the Rocket Man. The Rocket Man, right? Rocket Man. Here's another one. It's not an airport. You don't need to announce your departure. I'm leaving. Go, fuck off. This one's really good, though. Tom Elliott saying, kids, trust me when I say there was once a time when rock stars were rule-breaking badasses. And isn't that the truth, right? Isn't that the truth? What happened to these losers, right? What happened? There's like a handful of them out there. Let me predict. I think Mick Jagger is probably our only hope to get one of these boomer rock stars to be a Bitcoiner. I can't really think of anyone who's on the table still that might join our real revolution, not their fake one. So I don't know. Mick Jagger might be the only one I still have hope for. I know John Lennon's son, Sean Ono Lennon, is a big Bitcoiner. So that's one, but he's not really a rock star. He's not really from that era, right? This is a kid who grew up in the most privilege you can imagine. He had Steve Jobs himself deliver his Macintosh to his house as a child and teach him how to use it, right? Like, this is a kid who's lived a pretty neat life. And he's just not one of these folks, right? He's still not one of the 1960s rock stars. So I don't know who's left out there from that cohort that can join. They all said they were all down with this kind of thing when they were young, but as we see, they're not really into it. Maybe the Pink Floyd guys, but they're so stuck on this Israel question. You gotta hand it to them, the Pink Floyd guys, about standing up for the pro-war thing against the Russia-Ukraine situation, and they're kind of getting canceled for it, right? They're anti-war, and that's enough to get you canceled these days, according to the pop music world. So Anyway, Elton John, he ain't going to be a Bitcoiner. He's not invited to Bitcoin 2023. So there you go. It's all about the rappers, I guess, right? They're the only ones who have the guts, right? Alice Cooper, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And Dimnity says, hi from Australia. Where can I buy that hat from? Oh, this hat. Remember, we like to talk about Ye on this show, right? Ye. And we like to frame all of his recent stuff as high art, as the kind of art that's shocking and difficult and ugly to watch for sure, but maybe the most highest form of art I've ever witnessed, and some of the most uncomfortable inducing art that you can imagine. But remember, the reason I even put that frame on Kanye is because he started his campaign wearing this hat. And in my world, anyone who starts a presidential campaign wearing this hat deserves the benefit of the doubt, in the sense that this is art. Right? This is art. So you can buy the hat from Bitcoin Magazine. Bitcoin Magazine sells this hat. The minute we saw it could work, the company got together and put it out, and I think it's great, right? So Alice Cooper, we got Morrissey. Yeah, maybe Morrissey. It would be great if Keith was a toxic man. Yeah, Keith Richards should be a Bitcoiner for sure, right? For sure. Remember the Exile on Main Street album? I still listen to that album quite a bit, actually. It reminds me a little bit of being a Bitcoiner, because I don't know if you know the history of that album. They were chased by the taxman in the 1960s out of England, and the record label also was doctoring a lot of their music and forcing them to create music in a certain way. And they're the first band to break free of the studio publishing system. And coincidentally, it was aligned with them trying to avoid taxes. So they all moved to the south of France, where they weren't going to get taxed. And they split time between California and the south of France, where they wrote what people say is their masterpiece, the first non-studio produced album that had almost full creative control by the artists. And what they produced was an absolute masterpiece. It's a fun album to listen to, and I've been listening to it since the early days of Bitcoin, and it definitely gets me gets my energy up. They've got songs like Happy and Rocks Off, and a lot of good songs. So if you ever want to listen to an old rock and roll album, that's one of them. All right, let's get into the news though. So Twitter Files #3 came out last night, and of course, where can I get Satoshi Wedding Murders? It'll be out soon, guys. It's written. I've been holding off. It's just a publication thing. Trying to get some of the art in order, which I'm using AI for. Have a few people that might be involved in the launch and release. I'll let you know. You can read the first chapter at nolanvalley.com though, and everything else finished, ready to go. Has been edited by many people. I put a lot of professional quality people around it who I paid to make sure that what I produce is of the highest possible standard, not using any publishing houses, but publishing on my own, using real professionals, editors, all that kind of stuff. So, and the good news is, I wrote it so many years ago already, and I've been tinkering it with ever since. But the good news is, and the reason why I'm taking a bit of time, is because I actually think, if I'm right, it could change the world, because I predicted almost everything correctly about how AI is going to interact that we're seeing now. I could be wrong as it goes forward, but this idea that it's not like a robot and speaks like a robot and is really boring and it's your friend, but it's actually almost like a child, the way it looks up to humans and wants to please them, and the way we interact. Basically, my theory is that our only interface with technology going forward will be AI. There won't be apps anymore. And the AI in my story is really there to help us negotiate our Bitcoin wallets and help create the time for Bitcoin market, which is the only market that exists in that future world, because the AI takes care of most of our needs for us. There's no material want or physical needs in this world. There's still trouble, of course, right? Bitcoin absolutely doesn't solve everything. It just solves organization of society and creating a clear way to understand that time is money and money is time, right? Which is what we need right now. We just need to simplify our accounting mechanisms to truly understand that time is money and money is time. Because right now, money is actually a combination of the cost of information and the cost of energy and a few other categories which help distort the time for money market. And in my story, that distortion is all gone. That's a true hyper-Bitcoinized world running on a Bitcoin standard. In a purely Bitcoin standard world, time is money. You don't need to know more about it than that. Money is time and time is money. That's how I see it anyway. It's that simple. So that's what I wrote the story on. And I even, what I wanted to do in my book is create the circumstances that could kill Bitcoin. So if you read my book, you'll find out that I do have a frame that is mortally dangerous to Bitcoin. And it's something that could replace the Bitcoin standard. That was the challenge I gave myself. What would destroy Bitcoin in the next fourth turning, for example? And I'm not saying it's true. It's just what I saw as a potential to kill it. And if you read the book, you'll see I might be right. It's bleak shit. I've mentioned it before when Vitalik was talking about synthetic wombs, right? Synthetic wombs. I guess he's interested in synthetic wombs. I guess because women are slaves or something like that, because they have to procreate, so they can't have these great corporate careers. It sucks for them. They can't go and work for their boss and make their boss happy. So I guess he's worried about synthetic womb. He's worried about women's ability to participate in the professional world. Now, I of course want women to participate in the professional world and all that stuff, but I don't think synthetic wombs are necessarily the answer. So, basically that's what it comes down to. What could kill Bitcoin is if instead of time for money, that our economy was actually run around human life creation. If human life creation becomes the actual main commodity. Now, why would that happen? Well, if you can make them, if you can grow them in the way that you want. They could be your own sycophantic follower. So in the end, they have these fiefdoms and stuff around human control of procreation, human scientific control around procreation. So it's just a theory about what could kill Bitcoin. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting story. So you'll get to read the whole book. It's a lot of fun. So back to the story. Now, Twitter files number 3 came. I won't break down the whole release by Matt Taibbi. You're going to see that a lot out there, right? You're going to see tons of people break it down. The upshot of it is they were after Trump way before January 6th and had plans in place to both throttle his reach and a plan to trigger his exit from Twitter is what the findings seem to underline. So, and then even the way in which they did it looks to be almost on a whim and completely under the very loose, almost conversational Slack channel where major decisions were decided. The way we would decide, normal people working for a company would decide what the OKRs are, what the agenda is in a meeting in a week. And on Slack, did you get that agenda item on the list? It was treated like that, right? It was almost casual in the way that they were talking about, almost casual in the way they talked about it. Now, what I want to talk about is exactly what Justin is mentioning right here. So, of course, as we said a week ago when this stuff started, Matt Taibbi published 1 week ago, and we made the prediction that morning, Saturday morning, exactly 1 week ago this morning. I said, all you're going to get from this Twitter file stuff, doesn't matter how revelatory it is, and it is revelatory, right? It is 100% revelatory to see this stuff. In fact, this was our worst fears. They're all true. You can actually assume way more things that you fear are actually true now because of how true this fear and the size of this fear being confirmed actually are. So, so when you look at it that way, there's all kinds of trouble with the reaction, and the reaction is what we're going to talk about. So last week I predicted it's ignoring, it's attacking the messenger, downplaying it, all those things, right? All those things. So now here's basically what happened. Cernovich says, tonight's nothing burger. Trump's tweets were suppressed weeks before the election by a hidden council of communist sympathizers and Stalin lovers. The FBI had tweets taken down. Democrats spread election disinformation with a clear pass from UL. So what they're really talking about is one side got to say, oh, the election is going to be crooked. Oh, they're saying don't trust the election. Remember, I was saying that the election was going to be crooked from July 2020 on. When I was in New York City and I received all my mail-in ballots, and I'm telling you, they stuffed every mailbox. And I don't even have a right to vote. There's no one in my house who has a right to vote. My children are born in the United States. They can't vote, right? They can't vote. So all my mailboxes filled with ballots, right? What was it for me to write a name on it and send it in and or give it to someone who knew what to do with it? It was nothing. You could go from door to door and collect these things if you wanted to. So we could tell right away with the rules changing, with mail-in, with all that stuff, that things were happening fast, and Trump and everyone was warning this election is going to be crooked. I made a recommendation inside of Kraken because I was watching FTX come up, right? One of my jobs at Kraken at the time, I was working for Kraken that summer as a strategist reporting directly to the CEO. We didn't set up the strategy department to report to product or anyone else. We reported directly to the CEO to protect the CEO from bad ideas and to directly give him good ideas that he could act on immediately and instantly. So as someone who came from a media company, I saw something happening. An election that would have an unclear result would have a demand for a data point in the days after the election. So I saw that FTX was running a election prediction market. And I brought that, I wrote a whole thing. This is why it's important. This is what we can get out of it. Very short, but the way a strategy memo was written, like what's the point of this and what's the logic and what should we do and what are the next steps, right? Just a nice thing that can be presented to people who don't have a lot of time and can make quick decisions. And my argument before the election was the election is not going to have a clear result. Therefore, in the days after the election, they're going to look for data to fill the airwaves to talk about the direction and predictions about where it's going to head. And I said that election prediction markets are going to be an important data point because they're going to say, oh, these people are not sentimental about the favorites. They're just Wall Street people. It's just bettors. And we're going to see what the odds are. And I noticed that FTX had one. And I said, well, this is going to get a lot of attention after the election. And I said, we should copy it because there's no volume in this election prediction market. They only had like $1 million of trading on it. And I said, we could probably beat that, right? And if we have more volume, then we'll be the reference after any hung election. And everyone will have to report on our market in order to predict where it's headed, which means our brand, at the time, Kraken, right, would get a lot of attention. So I made the case clearly to everyone. We didn't do it for various reasons, right? It's not just that, oh, bad idea, it just died on the vine and we were looking at other stuff, but it remained my job to look at what FTX was doing and to, I guess, market size a competitor that was growing very quickly. In the days after the election, my prediction was true. The global media paid tons of attention to the FTX prediction market. The FTX brand went all around the world. Now, I had a very interesting seat because I knew that SBF was giving millions of dollars to Biden, and I knew the prediction market was his. And when it was getting reported on by mainstream media after, they always did it with the same fake logic. Oh, these non-sentimental gamblers don't give a shit about Trump or Biden, but clearly who they're deciding has some basis in reality. In the days immediately after the election, it tilted to Trump, slightly tilted to Trump. But all of a sudden, it went the other way, heavily, and it was heavily reported on. And the whole world said, oh, the non-sentimental gamblers say Biden wins, and it did a full global media tour. You can go back and look. You can go back and look at all the images of the prediction market put into mainstream media articles saying, look, the gamblers say Biden wins. It's true. And you got a certain cognitive closure out of that. If you remember, there was a ton of pressure after enough people had decided that Biden won that you couldn't even talk about it anymore, right? It was all, and from then on, you couldn't talk about it. It was a big surprise in that week after when videos started disappearing off of YouTube for people who didn't understand what they had done wrong, right? They were saying the same things they'd said the week before, but you had to just accept the results and move on. Now, I continue to believe the important part of our electoral system is the peaceful transfer of power. It doesn't matter if the election was crooked or not, right? So I recognized Biden as president day one, basically, right? I said, they're never going to go back on this. This is not going to happen. Accept it and deal with the aftermath, right? So I accepted it immediately, and dealt with the aftermath, and continue to believe that Trump won't go anywhere because he won't shut up about 2020, right? If Trump had one policy, which was make elections fair again in 2024, maybe I would support him, maybe. He's too old and there's other reasons why I wouldn't support him, but talking about the last one is the stupidest thing you can do. for many reasons, right? For many reasons, not just strategically. We just have to get over these things and get to the next one. That's the important part of democracy, as far as I can tell, right? It's not so much was the election good in the first place. At this point, I don't think we've had honest elections in America for 70 or 80 years. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. It looks bad. If you look at the inner cities, for example, they've been unchallenged by Democrat wins in most major American cities for 70 years. How do you get 70 years of terrible failure and never, ever, ever, ever have to pay the price? I mean, it's pretty easy to infiltrate municipal elections because no one cares. No one's that interested. No one's that involved. There isn't like a hot button issue that gets people out to vote. So if you just motivate a few people, you can turn the result very quickly, which is why a lot of people think organized crime has been so involved in municipal elections for so long, because it's very easy for them to get people motivated and do the thing, right? So I'd say we haven't had a decent election. And I'll even say, when the mainstream media went out and said the 2020 election was the most honest we've ever had, that could be true. I think that could be true. It's just the other ones were bad, right? It's just that the other ones were so bad. So there you go, right? I just bought 3 hats and 4 magazines. Cool, Indemnity, awesome. Yeah, it's a good store. And the store at the show in the Bitcoin conference in Miami is always great too. We have a lot of great swag there. So just so you know. So so all this stuff comes out, and just like the election, there's certain minds you can't change, right? And Glenn Greenwald says it. So this is all the Twitter files number 3 coming out. Here's Glenn Greenwald's assessment, right? Here's Glenn Greenwald's assessment. 2 things. First, he says, Yoel Roth meeting with the FBI weekly and his little censorship minions absolutely degraded Twitter into little more than a full-on Democrat Party activist machine, all while lying to the public about its function. This was a massive public fraud and 2020 interference. Here's the point, though, of what the most important point about what Glenn Greenwald said in reaction to this. I'd like to remind everyone, Twitter's ban of Trump was widely condemned by world leaders, including those who dislike Trump. Germany's Merkel, France's Macron, Mexico guy, EU officials, right? Remember, everyone did say, what the fuck is going on here? This is a sitting US president. How can you do this, right? Here's what Glenn summarizes that whole fact with. Only US liberal journalists cheered. Rogue actors as always, right? Only one group cheered, US liberal journalists. The rest of the world, even if they were politically not aligned with Trump, were mortified. Angela Merkel said, this is bad, right? Lots of people said it was bad, but you couldn't mention that at the time, right? You're not allowed to mention it. And here's what Glenn Greenwald says, building on that thought. He says, Democrat / liberal journalists and their followers will never think that it's a big deal that the US security state and big tech are aggressively censoring the internet, is because they favor this. They want more of it. And he puts up a poll saying this is what they want, right? No matter how many documents you show them, from the Twitter files or other leaks, proving that the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and big tech are united to censor the internet, they will utter nothing burger, because these journalists are the ones who cheer this regime. They demand it, right? They wanted this censorship. So of course they're not going to say, oh, look what happened now, right? So we predicted it a week ago that the Twitter files would actually not flip many people from one side to the other. All it will do is give people like us confidence, who were unsure about how to speak about this stuff and were vulnerable to counter arguments because we didn't really have the goods. Now we have the goods. So at least in our own worlds, in our own psychology, we feel strengthened, we feel confident, and what we saw was real. And what we saw was real, and we have to destroy it and move forward, right? So here's where things are going. Here's where things are going. There were more findings from it that show how, at least to me, how Bitcoin can fix this. And it comes from something called the theory of the firm, right? The theory of the firm. The theory of the firm is written by a guy named Ronald Coase. Some people call it Coase theorem. Ronald Coase was a lawyer who never wrote a economics book or whatever, wrote a series of law articles which were published in law reviews between the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and where he really built this whole theory. In 1991, he won the Nobel Prize for economics, a lawyer who won it. It's not the first one, but even myself as a trained lawyer, a lot of my economic thought actually comes from this guy, Ronald Coase. He worked with Milton Friedman and all these other fellows. So his whole idea is the following, and it's called the theory of the firm because he tries to answer where companies come from. Like, how do we create these things? Where did we create these legal persons? Remember, a company is a legal person, right? That's another way to say it. In French, we say a personne morale, a moral person. I don't know why we say a moral person, but that's what we call companies in the French language, a moral person. So you're a person, I'm a person. That's why sometimes people say when you see a name changed, right? You see a name changed from first letter capital to everything else capital, first letter capital to small letters, and then the name is changed to all capitals. There are some people out there who think that you have been incorporated for the purposes of a federal government using your identity for collateral. I don't know if you've ever seen those theories out there, but there are some people who believe, right? Some people who believe that the Social Security system in the United States is really a way to say that the human beings are lost persons and that they're now incorporate and can have debts and all that stuff. Because of course, the US federal debt is based on something, right? It's based on bonds. And what are bonds? I can tell you what a bond is. Where do you see bonds other than in finance? Prisons, slavery, right? So bonds. The bonds exist because they're able to collateralize humans, human output, right? That's how a country has the ability to go into debt, because it's basically collateralizing the workforce under it, right? That's what's going on, right? Now, I don't know anything about this capital letters and social security number system, and I don't know the details, right? I've just heard it before, and from a legal point of view, it makes sense to me. So I don't know, right? I don't know about it. But think of that company thing, right? So the thing that makes it, the best way to understand Coase theorem is to look at law the way it would work without corporations. The way law would work without corporations is like this, right? A noise complaint. I'm making too much noise. You don't like it. We're neighbors. We go before a judge, right? What's the judge going to say? The judge is going to say, okay, you don't make noise before this time or after this time. And you, the other person, you don't complain about the noise before this time, right? Come down the middle. A reasonable thing. Come down the middle, right? Everyone gets a bit. We compromise. We go home. Corporations, right, that exist to take away that uncertainty in a sense, right? The legal system should come down in the middle, but there are implications to the legal system coming down in the middle. Maybe you were trying to open up a bar, and now the noise complaints mean you can't open your establishment late at night, right? So two factors come in. There's more, but I've simplified it here. To maximize profits, right? So transaction externalities. You don't want to waste money on stuff, right? You want to internalize all these things and manage them yourself. So to maximize profits. So instead of going to the judge for the noise complaint, now you hire a lawyer, and you don't really want to have to hire a lawyer every day because there's another neighbor and another neighbor. So you actually make him a part of your company, right? You don't hire him as an independent lawyer. That's too much negotiating. You say, well, I need a lawyer on call, and I'm going to make you a staff member, a general counsel to my business. So now you're an employee, right? You're an employee, and I'll send you anytime I want to deal with this son of a bitch complaining about the noise. And he's just a neighbor. He's not smart. You're a lawyer. You kick his ass and you get me more, right? You change the time. I want to be open later. Well, now you got a professional. His job is to win this fight against the guy just complaining about the noise. These aren't two neighbors anymore. So in the end, what he says is we have an imbalance. In order to manipulate the legal system, basically, you start gathering people together and you create these new persons out of them, moral persons, legal persons that are able to behave as an individual in terms of the law. Before the law, a company and a human being are the same thing. You can't tell the difference because they have the the ability to take on obligations and responsibilities. That's why we created the companies, to take on obligations and responsibilities as an individual can. And so we created all this. And what Ko said is that's why we have these large companies. Now, he argued that it would change over time, that technology would actually create reasons to shrink a company, that the transaction externalities that exist might become more simplified, and you wouldn't need a lawyer on staff in order to manipulate the legal system in an extreme case, right? So what's going on now? Let's put all that in context, right? What's going on? Even just look at corporate media for a second, right? Yesterday, we found out The Block, the third media company in crypto, let's say. And I'll count just for the second Bitcoin magazine in crypto, just because it's a subset of media, and most of the world would recognize Bitcoin magazine as a crypto publication, even though we know it's Bitcoin. So, The Block, I would say, with CoinDesk and Bitcoin magazine would be part of that big three media brands that most people know. There's a few others, Decrypt, but they're not as big and not that important, right? The Block, it turns out, was entirely funded secretly by SBF. We didn't know until yesterday. The staff at The Block didn't know. Frank Chaparro didn't know. Larry Cermak didn't know. People that I know there didn't know that this was going on, that SBF had bought out secretly the CEO of The Block. So The Block's credibility is in big trouble. I don't know if they survive. They have to get a new owner, that's for sure. A lot of people saying now that maybe we can't exist with these corporate owners in media in our space. Of course, CoinDesk, I don't know the details over there of what's going on. I worked at CoinDesk for years, was a small owner at one time. I still advise the senior staff over there and still help with consensus. So I am still on a retainer, like you would pay a lawyer to them. Not a large one, and don't need it to continue my life, but and hope CoinDesk does well, but it looks like they might get sold now, right? I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm not in a position to know, simply because the staff there are not told the same thing that the corporate owners are telling themselves, right? They tell them, don't worry, it's not happening, we love you guys. But who knows if that's true, right? I don't know. It's not really something I could know about just because of the position I'm in. I'm a little too close to the metal to know what's really going on there. I'm part of whatever uncertainty would be involved. So, but again, I just work for CoinDesk and help on the event, help them program, pick subjects, and I'm usually ignored, frankly, at this point. Not like it used to be. Some of my ideas are too Bitcoin focused for their minds to handle at times. They definitely appreciate what I bring, but it's not a Bitcoin show over there, and that is largely due to my inability to convince them to do more Bitcoin stuff, because that's all I'm interested in, right? I'm not out there telling them to create meta. I tried to take the word metaverse out of a thing the other day, and they were like, it's still. I said, just gaming, just gaming. I helped create their social coin, which is like for events. I love that kind of stuff where it's not a tradable coin. It's not a shit coin in the sense that there's no market for it. It's not worth money. It's really just a way for sponsors to give people stuff, right? Here's a coin, go trade it for a t-shirt at the booth, but that way you get a physical interaction at a physical booth at an event. We had a whole swag store, go watch these shows in the lead up to the event, and you can earn the coin and then spend it at the show on drinks and all that stuff. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I do with them, right? Fun stuff that is interesting. So we don't know, I don't know anything more than that, right? Definitely told them about SBF early, did not do the breaking story, but I told them where to look, right? I told them, I'd look at this stuff if I were you guys, and sure enough, they did it. So that's one corporate media company already that has trouble, The Block. CoinDesk, maybe, I don't know. All of this to say, I don't know what's going on over there. And it's not, as I said, it's not my job to know what's going on over there. I'm a consultant who helps them find product market fit to the best of my ability, even though they're not so into Bitcoin the way I am. They have a Bitcoin show and all that stuff, but they don't really see the whole market the way I do. I'm a big anti-ESG, put it that way, right? And they still have ESG content there. I would never in a million years recommend putting ESG on any stage ever. But I say this very openly to them, so I'm happy to say it openly to you and all that stuff. Corporate media infiltration. Here's Majid Nawaz talking about corporate infiltration in Twitter in light of these Twitter files, right? So here he is going through a thread listing all of the intelligence agents that pose as Twitter staff and who worked for Elon Musk. Because we saw yesterday there was the James Baker one, right? James Baker was the guy who signed the FISA warrants to spy on candidate Trump, right? And then he shows up at Twitter just a little while later, right? He's tweeted once since he joined Twitter, and that was to push Taylor Lorenz story complaining about Elon Musk. You know, Taylor Lorenz, the Washington Post journalist who is probably the most virulent NPC or mind virus person out there, right? Really mean and nasty, doxes people and then complains if she's doxed. And I mean, really nasty stuff over there. So that was one case. Here he goes through, Majid Nawaz goes through on his show, all the people, right? Here's Twitter has so many FBI agents. Let's do some housekeeping. Kevin McAlena, current Twitter senior corporate security analyst, ex-FBI intelligence for 12 years. Doug Hunt, current Twitter senior director, ex-FBI agent for 20 years. Mark Jurozowski, current Twitter director, corporate security risk, ex-FBI, 20 years. Douglas Turner, current Twitter senior manager, corporate and executive security services, ex-FBI, 14 years, ex-Secret Service, 7 years. Patrick G., current Twitter head of corporate security, ex-FBI agent, 23 years. The list goes on. He's got 17 different names here. 17 different names. Could you imagine? Right there, you can see that infiltration had happened at the corporate level. That these companies, even under Dorsey, he had no idea what's going on. People say, oh, what did Dorsey know? How could you know anything? Elon Musk didn't even know that ex-FBI agents were working for him. Now, there might be some you want to keep because they're working on the child stuff and the exploitation, but what did they achieve with the child stuff? Was there infiltration there? You bet your ass there was. Listen to this. Listen to this if you want your mind completely blown. We talked about the Balenciaga stuff, maybe the designer who did it, right? And we saw some of that designer's Instagram stuff, the teddies and the bondage, all that kind of stuff. Well, John Podesta, if you remember who John Podesta is, it was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. Hillary Clinton's campaign manager involved in the Hillary email stuff and all that stuff. I'm not a Hillary email person, by the way. I always thought that was a waste of everyone's time. Document management stuff, right? The Podesta thing, right? Podesta was the chief of staff or the chief of the campaign for Hillary Clinton, and is also an artist, they say. Have you seen his art? Well, it's kind of a bit, a lot of kids in the art, right? A lot of kids like from behind with their hands bound. A lot of things where you say, what the fuck is going on here, right? Now, it's not pornography, it's not, but something's up. And you see, I don't know if it's submissive or not, but there is definitely an aesthetic, and the aesthetic is involved with children. Corporate infiltration. Yesterday, 3 ladies quit Twitter's Trust and Safety Council. Ann Collier, Irilani, and who's this? Leslie Podesta. Who the fuck's Leslie Podesta? It's John Podesta's niece. John Podesta's niece quit Twitter yesterday. Yesterday. And what was she involved in? Child safety stuff. Now they're out there saying, oh, Elon's failing, right? But we followed on this story, on this show, from Eliza Blue, from others, that it's actually become the #1 priority at Twitter. And nothing happened before. We've seen Jack Dorsey even say, this isn't true, Elon. Elon has gone into the Twitter replies on all these stories and said, they hid it from you too. They hid it from you too, Jack. So John Podesta's niece, now, I'm not accusing her of anything. I don't know anything about her, right? I know she quit yesterday and she's John Podesta's niece, right? And the catacomb says, the simulation, well, I mean, what are the odds? What are the odds? Like what are the odds? And even the entertainment value of this, to see Podesta's name enter again at this point in the story, is very interesting. It's very, very interesting, right? So from that point of view, right, we think of these corporate scale, what corporate scale has come to, and what Bitcoin can do, right? We think about this Coase theorem for a second, right? So here's Cernovich. Elon Musk is the reason the regime tells you wealth is bad, even though they stack bags, right? Unless you have money in this world, there isn't much you can do. That's why they bankrupt people or make them go silent for fear of loss. The single most patriotic act you can take is to get rich. And I called today's show exactly that, right? You can serve in hell, or sorry, reign in hell and be dollar wealthy, or you can serve in heaven and be Bitcoin rich. And it comes down to that in the end, right? We do have money and we do have the ability to change the narrative. We don't need these sons of bitches, right? I run a news show that is more on top of anything in mainstream media, and I run it from my Starlink satellite and Twitter and my personal connections to people who are in Bitcoin and know what's going on. That's it, right? And we can kick their ass all day long. We don't need corporate media. We don't need any of those things, right? And that starts changing the thing, because the things that make the theory of the firm, it is information symmetry, right? You're trying to get information symmetry, and that's what can be exploited. That's why you hire a lawyer to pound on the information asymmetry, right? Against the neighbor who can't deal with a noise complaint versus a professional lawyer. Now, put that on a corporate scale, and you have the situation we're in. You have a situation where you've got a whole division at Twitter that was supposed to be there to protect kids, yet a guy who, I don't know about this guy, it doesn't sound good. I don't know any details other than the rumors and the other stuff and the art, which I find disgusting. So him and now his niece working there. I mean, what the fuck, right? It's crazy. It's crazy. So the good news is the corporate machine is under attack because we have our own money. Now, I predict the scale of companies is going to come way down, but that was already happening. You know, internet companies are smaller than industrial era companies, so that was already happening, right? But look, in England today, right, we've got more strikes, right? We got the trains, we got the energy strikes happening. They all want more money because of inflation. Their pay up because of cost of living. And here's someone predicting a wage price spiral is possible because of this in England, right? A wage price spiral. When you get into inflationary conditions, that can happen. Wages up, prices up, wages up, prices up, wages up, prices up, right? Also, at the same time, you get VW, Volkswagen, not building a new factory in Europe. They decided it yesterday. Why? Well, the energy policies suck and they're not welcome there really, and they're trying to build a battery factory, but they don't know about the rules and the regulations and the bureaucrats and all that stuff, right? So a major company probably changing what it does because of political policies, right? Here's Wall Street Silver on that. Europe's insane energy policy has consequences. Companies won't build new factories in Europe because energy prices are insane and the elected leaders are committing economic suicide. Volkswagen delaying and will eventually cancel plans to build in Europe, right? So they've only just postponed the decision, but probably not going to go through, right? So in the end, what Bitcoin can actually achieve through our ability to communicate, through our ability to not be worried, like what Cernovich said, right? That they can bankrupt you, that they can fire you. Do you know these people who don't know how to have their own audience, like Barry Weiss? You know, we talk about Michael Schellenberger all the time on this show. He's got the next Twitter files, by the way, right? We talk about Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss. I've been talking about those three people on this show for a year now, as probably the only journalists worth following, as well as Glenn Greenwald, right? And that Elon chose these three people that are the same people I talk about literally all the time on this show, to me is a very good thing. I have confidence because he chose the same people I would have chosen. I mean, literally the people I choose daily to bring us conversation material, to bring us news. I mean, that's who I go to. When I prepare the show in the morning, I go to Glenn Greenwald's Twitter feed. I go to Michael Schellenberger's Twitter feed. I go to Scott Adams' Twitter feed if you guys don't follow him. Maybe Tim Pool, but not necessarily. Styx Hexenhammer 666, I always pass by him. And then, of course, just what's going on Twitter. But these are all independent voices, right? Styx Hexenhammer isn't really a journalist. He just does 10-minute rants and a daily live stream. He's great. He's great. So I don't think he's going to get any Twitter files, for example, just like I don't think Scott Adams is getting any Twitter files. But Schellenberger, who produces the long form stuff on Substack with the tweets that go with it in tweet threads, excellent tweet threads. Barry Weiss cultivated her own audience on Substack when she left New York Times. Matt Taibbi cultivated his own audience when he left Rolling Stone magazine. And these people are proving that you don't need the corporate structure in order to get the news out there, and therefore are much more reasonable people to follow, right? I believe I would disagree with a lot of these people on all kinds of policy, but that doesn't matter. It used to be that way. You can disagree with someone and still like their material because they bring the best arguments. Glenn Greenwald and I agree on a lot of stuff, I'd say, but I think in some ways we're totally different, right? I've met him, love the guy, have nothing but good friendly vibes with him. But I would imagine we can get into a debate pretty easily, right? Pretty easily. Not about Bitcoin, that's the good news. Well, maybe I don't think he's as hardcore as I am. The point is, with information symmetry, asymmetry, with Bitcoiners flexibility, with Bitcoiners creating these new companies. And remember what Cernovich says, get rich. Well, the path for us, I continue to believe it, isn't convincing that person to have a bit of cold storage Bitcoin or that person to have some cold storage Bitcoin. That's all important. But the path to hyper-Bitcoinization is this. Energy companies themselves are the closest thing to power that we have in the world today. The energy companies can dictate to the politicians. They can dictate to other companies what's going on. Our path forward as Bitcoiners, particularly in America, is to get control of US energy companies. How do you get control of them? You make them rich. That's the patriotic thing to do. That's the pro-Bitcoin, pro-USA, pro-freedom thing to do. Make the energy companies richer so that they need us so much in the same way that Coase theorem operates, right? That they now can't get rid of you because they require it. And if we do that, if we make US energy companies richer, and then quickly move to take control of them, which I think will happen because we're going to be the best coordinating force in the world, especially when people don't want to pay the sole US dollar oil market. And now that we can talk about it, right, now that there's options, I don't think the BRICS are strong enough to launch their own currency. I think they're in big trouble, actually, with China, Russia. I mean, these guys are toast. America kicked their ass, right? I think America's back in one of these positions where it left a lot of the world behind after COVID. I really believe that. Everyone's laughing in America at the beginning of, oh, look at how terrible they are with COVID. Look how great China is. Oh my God, look at the Europeans. They're so clever. They know how to shut down and they're so smart and nice to each other. Oh, great. Look at you dumb Americans, right? You can't even handle lockdowns. Well, who's better now? Who's better off, right? Who's better off? I mean, it's clear that the United States, by far the strongest economy in the world right now, and our institutions being revitalized in real time. We are getting rid of this media stuff. It can't survive this. Now, the individual writers can stay as dumb and blind to all of this as they want, but the companies themselves won't make it. They won't make it, right? We're going to destroy them. And the companies that will make it are the US energy companies. And we're going to infiltrate those the same way the politicians infiltrated Twitter and all these other places. Bitcoiners are going to take over these industries. And when we do, we're going to flip the switch. And when we flip the switch, there's going to be a new market for energy in the world. And once we do that, game over. We win. We're on a Bitcoin standard. So there you go. Let's make Cotter Bitcoiners. They got a bunch. Cotera Bitcoiners. What's Cotera? They got a bunch of natural gas. Let's make Cotera Bitcoiners. Cotera? I don't know, Dex. The group that think because name spelling is capitalist are corporations that are. Group that think because name spelling is capitals are corporations. They have a case, or is it crazy talk? Do they have a case, or is it crazy talk? The group that think because name spelling is capitals are corporations and are trying to break away. Do they have a case? So what you're saying is, do the I guess you're referring to, Bud, oh yeah, Coterra, American Oil and Gas Company. Yes, that's them. Yeah, make them rich. Yeah. All the energy companies, all of them. Politically, I would say different, but on human rights, I'd say I agree. Yeah. Human rights, I would exactly. That's it. Catacombs. I would agree on human rights 100%, and do agree 100% with Glenn Greenwald. On some policies, we would probably disagree, right? But maybe not even anymore. Maybe that's all blending together. So the name spelling of the capitals, but I don't know the truth about that. That's one of those things out there that you can see a lot of people talk about. I know this, that I didn't get a social security card from one of my children, and their passport is written in the old way. First name, first letter capital, other letters not capital. My first daughter, they forced the social security card on us at the hospital, and her whole name is capitals. So I don't know anything about it past that. Now, the legally it all makes sense. I will say that, right? That if you look at it this way, American people can be thought of as lost. They're lost. We don't know where they are. And most of the logic is that the United States Inc., the company, the federal government company that sits in DC outside of the laws of the United States, because it's not a state, right? Allows this relationship to happen. I don't know about that. I don't. It's an argument that makes sense, right? Like airline tickets, yeah. So like airline tickets, yes. So so I don't know about that part, right? I don't know if it's really the way it works. I do know that there is a way to go to your state Secretary of State and become a non-citizen national of the United States. There is such a thing as a non-citizen national. And a non-citizen national is all you have to do is pledge allegiance. There's no formality. You get a US passport, but it's not the same passport. There's three types of passports in America. There's the normie, diplomat, and this other one. And I've met people with the other one. They exist. These people exist. And what I've explained to you is something some Americans swear by. They swear by it. So they don't. These are the people that don't get the license plates and stuff. More than you'd think. Where I live here in Vermont, you know how many people have they write their license plate by hand? We don't do license plates up here. We live in a cool place, man. All right, team. Stuff to take care of this morning. Fun episode. Peace.